Alabama gas days. He says, do you remember Larry Lee? He was a Birmingham.
Speak up.
He said, do you remember Larry Lee, who was a Birmingham JC? I said, yes, do I ever. Larry Lee, when I was in the Birmingham Junior Chamber back in the, when Birmingham was a city back in the 60s and 70s, we had so much progress, and Larry and the Birmingham Junior Chamber was part of that. He was active with airport expansion, the Civic Center development, so many projects that we did back then. Had a lot of fun in Birmingham. He's a big AU fan. You can tell that when he comes up here. He's a big AU fan now. And when he was with the Birmingham Junior Chamber, Emory Cunningham hired him to be a featured writer over at Progressive Farmer and Southern Living magazine. He took his job very seriously. In fact, he had a pig in his basement in Ensley, Alabama. Did the county or the city come out and remove that pig?
The pig, I took care of the pig.
You took care of the pig. Larry's always fun to be around. He'll let you know he's an Auburn fan. I've been to a couple of Auburn games with him, and I'd heard that Larry had spoken to the Gardendale Republican Club a couple of weeks ago, and I said, we'll get him down here. And Larry will tell you how he feels about things. Larry Lee lives in Montgomery, Alabama. Before retiring, he was director of the Center for Rural Alabama, where he coordinated an extensive study of high-performing, high-poverty rural schools. The result was the publication Lessons Learned from Rural Schools. He frequently writes about education issues for Alabama newspapers. He's co-author of Beyond the Interstate and Crossroads Connections, one dealing with the crisis in rural Alabama and the other strategies for rural Alabama. He is chairman of the advisory board of HIPPY Alabama, an early childhood learning program. He was recently recognized by the Council of Leaders in Alabama Schools for his work as an advocate for public education. Larry is a graduate of Auburn University.
No.
My friend Larry Lee.
Well, thank you, Joe. Y'all don't know how much I was dreading that introduction. And the part he was reading there toward the end was actually true. All that other stuff, but now the part about having the pig in the basement, Joe, we actually lived in Bush Hills when I had the pig in the basement, and that's a long story. I won't go into that. But I know I'm not being politically correct by wearing an Auburn vest today. But doggone it, after winning 3 straight games we were supposed to lose, the heck with being politically correct. Warning. And I don't think my friend Preston Huddleston will disagree with me. And it's delighted to be here to see some familiar faces and to see, especially see my friend Leslie Searcy, who I've known her husband Jim, and many of y'all probably know him, worked with Ted Von Cannon and Preston at MDB for many years. And I think the world of Leslie, she and I just don't agree on some things. We have the same passion, we just don't have the same ideas. Well, as Joe said, about 45 years ago, there was a young insurance man in Birmingham who wanted to be president of the Birmingham JCs. And let me assure you, he's bigger today than he was then too. And since I was an associate editor at Progressive Farmer magazine, and I was in the JCs, and I had an interest in politics, I helped him. Now that young man was Joe Fuller. And that was my first real involvement over 45 years ago in politics. And we ran a very high-tech campaign. In fact, we had a slideshow. See, this was way before we even knew about PowerPoints, fax machines, cell phones, and Al Gore hadn't even invented the internet back then. And about that same time frame, you would be interested to know that I was elected to the Jefferson County Republican Executive Committee. And I dare say that back then, had you held a meeting like this, there'd probably be 3 people here this morning. Because the Republicans wasn't very cool back in that part of the world, or that part of time. Now, my interest in education is more recent. As Joe mentioned, I was working for the Department of Agriculture and Industries in Montgomery in rural development when we did a study of 10 high-poverty, high-performing rural schools around the state. And that was without doubt, the most heartwarming thing that I've ever done. Because two colleagues and I drove over 10,000 miles visiting schools from Mobile County all the way up to the Tennessee Valley. We interviewed over 300 people. I went to more fall festivals, PTA meetings, PTO meetings, Native American days than I care to remember. And we were trying our best just to figure out what makes these little schools do so well in the face of so many challenges. And I made an awful lot of memories. I'll never forget my first trip to a little school called Calcedeva, which is in the north end near Mount Vernon in Mobile County. 85% of the children there are Native American. I thought the principal was about to take me in an old storage room, and to my dismay, it was 2 fifth-grade classrooms in an ancient portal. I stood in a gym full of working-class folks one night in Cleveland County at a fall festival, and the principal told me, just whispered in my ear, said, "I bet 25% of the adults in this room have a drug issue." Richard Bryant, who was principal at Pine Hill of a school, elementary school in Wilcox County, told me how he went to the jail, got 5 trustees, and he said, "If y'all will work all summer long, I can guarantee you're going to have a good meal, and we're going to fix this school up like it ought to be before I become the principal." And then I realized that what I was seeing and what I was hearing and reading about education didn't jive. I saw math cores from Little Fruithurst Elementary School over in Cleveland County that is on the backside of nowhere, I can promise you that. And their math scores are higher than any of the 5 elementary schools in the Auburn City school system. Yet, I kept reading about how poorly our teachers are doing and how poorly our schools are doing. So I started doing a lot of research. I visited a lot more schools. And I got to know some people from across Alabama and from outside of Alabama as well. Dr. Diane Ravitch is a former Assistant Secretary of Education under the first President, George Bush. And she asked me to join the board of the Network for Public Education, which I gladly accepted and joined in with people from Texas, New York, Georgia, Florida, Indiana, California, and other places. Now that was eye-opening because I discovered that the effort to make public education look bad was a national effort. It was not just in Alabama. In fact, it was much more advanced across the country than it was here. And this effort is being fueled by extraordinary amounts of money from sources like the Gates, Walton, and Broad foundations and a lineup of extremely wealthy individuals. Well, I'm a naturally cynical kind of guy, and I've often said, I don't know if I became a journalist because I was a cynic, or I was a cynic because I was a journalist. But that's just the way. I've always been somebody that says, well, you got to prove that to me. So I kept asking myself, why is all this going on? Why is these enormous amounts of money being dumped into this campaign about education? In California, they elect their state school superintendent, which, in my opinion, is not the brightest idea in the world. Last year was an election for California school superintendent. They spent $24 million in California, 3 times how much was spent in the governor's race to elect a state school superintendent. And I have to ask myself, why did former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg send $100,000 to Minnesota for a school board race? Why did retired real estate developer Stephen Chamberlain spend $100,000 on a local school board race in Richmond, California? I mean, these are just bizarre amounts of money. And all the time we're told it's about the kids. Well, anyone who believes that, I want you to see me afterwards because I want to talk to you about some beachfront property over around Irondale. Folks, this is all about money. It's projected that the market size of the K-12 education system in this country is $750 billion annually. It is a huge, huge, huge market. There's a gentleman named Michael Moe. He's a former director of Merrill Lynch. He heads a company which invests in education startups. And he recently said, the education industry today is the healthcare industry of 30 years ago. And think about that just a second. Education today is where healthcare was 30 years ago. A financial expert says education is the last honeypot for Wall Street. And I can promise you that while most of us drive by a school today and we see a place where children go to get educated, there are people in this country who drive by a school and see the pot at the end of the rainbow. This past Tuesday, March the 10th, you could have attended a seminar at the Harvard Club in New York City entitled Bonds and Blackboards, Investing in Charter Schools. The Gates and Walton Foundation sponsored it. You could have learned which charter school organizations have growing net assets and have zero defaults among investment-grade charter school bonds. You would not have heard anybody make a presentation about classroom achievement. And I think the first clear signal that Alabama was joining this movement was 2 years ago when we passed the Alabama Accountability Act. In my opinion, that was the most radical education policy in our state's history, but not a single educator, not the state superintendent of education, nor any member of the State Board of Education, knew what was going on. Now, the new bill provided tax credits for donors to a scholarship program to pay tuition at private schools for students from failing schools. That is intent number 4 and only intent dealing with the students in our failing schools in the bill. Now, every dollar that goes to a scholarship is a dollar that does not go to the Education Trust Fund. And the public, you and I, were told over and over again, the reason we passed this legislation was to help students trapped in failing schools by their zip codes. Time after time after time I heard that or read that. And while we have helped, and Leslie and her organization have helped some students in failing schools, we've also helped a lot of students who are not in failing schools and students who are already enrolled in private schools. And today we have a lot of money and a lot of people in this state who don't know Bruton from Bridgeport, and they're trying to tell us what to do with our schools. But yet, we won't talk to the experts in education who are the teachers and principals across the state of Alabama. For example, there's a group out of Sacramento called Students First, Sacramento, California. Guess how many lobbyists they have registered in Montgomery with the Ethics Commission? I got 10. That's more lobbyists than the School Board Association, the class group, which is administrators, and the Superintendent's Association together have 10 lobbyists registered to a company from Sacramento, California. The Alabama Federation for Children is a new group. Last year they spent nearly $350,000 on campaigns in this state for legislators and school board members. All of that money came from 3 out-of-state millionaires. One wrote a check for $100,000, another wrote a check for $100,000, and another wrote a check for $150,000. Now, would you tell me why a millionaire real estate developer in San Francisco woke up one morning told his wife, I can't sleep well because I'm worried about those youngins in Wilcox County, Alabama, and I'm going to send them a check for $100,000. I don't understand it. And we keep getting all these mixed signals. For instance, we tell Washington that we don't want them to tell us what to do. We tell folks like y'all, we want smaller government, not more bureaucracy. Yet last week, the Alabama Senate voted 22-12 for a charter school bill that not only creates more bureaucracy and takes money from local schools to fund it, the bill also sets up a politically appointed commission that can override your local school board. So evidently, it's not good for Washington to tell Montgomery what to do, but it's okay for Montgomery to tell locals what they can do. We tell people, we don't want a lottery. We don't want a lottery. But we're going to use a lottery to decide which kids get into a charter school. We talk about having a first-class education system, and then we tell charter school operators their teachers do not have to be certified. I go to UAB next month for a checkup. I hope the doctors who see me have some kind of certification. I visit a lot of schools and a lot of classrooms. I mean, I travel an awful lot. I've never seen a school nor a classroom labeled Republican or Democrat. And I think it's time for us grown-ups to stop using school kids as the rope in a political tug-of-war. Today, we're offering our children to the highest bidder, to whoever has the most money in their political action committee. There's 733,000 kids in public schools in Alabama. They will determine the future of this state. It's time that we as Alabamians join together and work together to see that those 733,000 kids, and all of them, get the best education possible. It's time we bring different voices to the same table instead of passing legislation and then bragging about, well, look who we kept it a secret from. This is not a Republican or a Democratic issue. This is an Alabama issue. And I think it's time we truly understand that education is everyone's business. Every person in this room has a stake in education. And it's time we understand that our children do not need to be the pawns in a political chess game. And it's time we listen to the scripture from Matthew that says, inasmuch as ye have done it unto the least of these my brethren, ye have done it unto me. Thank y'all.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yes, sir.
And now we're calling on C.D. Denson to introduce our next speaker.
Do we get to ask questions?
At the end.
Thank you, Mr. Lincoln. If I get to stuttering a little bit, I'll apologize because I was involved
I do
in...
get the mic now.
You do? Okay. If I get to stuttering a little bit, I'll apologize. I was involved in a little bit of a scotch tasting event last night. So sorry about that. But I have the great honor to introduce to you today a man that really stuck his neck out, sacrificed a lot to go after a Democratic state senator from North Alabama who had held, and that being Roger Bedford, who had held the seat for around 3 decades. And by most accounts, people said there was no way that you could beat him. He had gained a stranglehold up there, and you couldn't do it. But Dr. Stutz did, and by the final tally, final recount, showed that he He did indeed win by a total of 70 votes. Isn't that right, Dr. Stutz? That's right.
You killed him.
Big win. Fuller and I went up to North Alabama a couple weeks ago to meet Dr. Stutz, and I found out through talking with him for about 5 or 10 minutes that back a few years ago he went to residency with my dad, Dr. D. Denson. There, stand up, Dad.
Stand up,
Now you see where I get my beer belly. But they went to residency together back in the 80s, and with my dad being his elder, hopefully my dad taught him a few things, and he was able to implement that in Dr. Stutz's practice. And kind of lost my train of thought there. But,
No more scotch for you.
no more. But please join me in and welcoming to our group our new state senator in the 6th District, Republican, Dr. Larry Stutz.
Well, can y'all all hear okay? Do I need to raise the microphone up any? First, I want to thank you for asking me to come today. And D. Denson and I were in residency together. He was ahead of me, and so he was one of my bosses during residency and did teach me a lot. And I have enjoyed getting to see him again today. This is my first venture into anything political. I'll give you a little bit more of my background of why I'm the age that I am, and D. Denson was ahead of me in residency. I went to undergraduate school and to veterinary school at Auburn and practiced as a veterinarian for 5 years, and then at 30 years old in 1984 went to medical school in Mobile, and then came back to Birmingham at Caraway and did my residency there from 88 to 92. And then we've been living back in the Shoals area in North Alabama for the last almost 23 years. And Jackie and I have been married for 34 years and have 4 adult children and 1 grandchild and 1 on the way. The thing I think that did help me a little bit in my election there is I had delivered about 10,000 babies in that area over the previous 20 years. Most of them weren't old enough to vote yet, but their parents were, and so there were a lot of families that I had touched. What I wanted to share with you, I want to just tell you a few things that I've learned getting involved in politics for the first time, and then hit just a few of the issues facing the legislature, and then I'll be glad to answer any questions that you all might have. When I first decided to run, I'll tell you, nobody but Bill Armstead and my wife and myself thought that I had a chance to win. Roger Bedford had been in office for 32 years, and he was first elected, I think, when he was 26 years old, straight out of law school, and had served continuously since that time. But when I first decided to run, somebody told me that the first most important thing in politics is sincerity. And once you learn to fake that, you got it made. Then when I got down to Montgomery for orientation, I figured out that a lot of things in Montgomery are kind of like wrestling. It's pretty entertaining, but most of it's not real. But on a serious note, at our orientation session, one of the senior senators that spoke to us in orientation said, you need to take every vote very seriously, that every vote you cast will either require or restrict something for every citizen in the state of Alabama. And I've thought about that so many times over the last few weeks, that everything you do is either going to require somebody to do something or it's going to restrict them from doing something. And that makes the importance of what we do every day really weigh on your mind. The other thing that I've learned over the last 2 weeks now is how partisan the issues can be. The lobbyists that come talk to you, there's not much middle ground for any of them. One lobbyist has got their issues so strongly on this side, and somebody else with a logical argument is exactly opposite. And it's hard to find middle ground on those issues. I realize, too, that there are some people there that are going to vote against anything that comes up. This past week in one of our committee meetings, a bill that was before the committee, someone had noticed a typographical error in the copy of the bill that we were presented. It was a reference to a previous bill, and it should have been section 411, and it was typed section 410. So one digit needed to be changed in the copy that we had. So somebody made a motion to amend the bill to make that correction. And we were going to vote by voice vote. You know, all in favor of the amendment correcting this one number, typographical error. Well, one of the members of the committee called for a roll call vote. So we had a roll call vote, and he voted against it. Like really, you're against correcting the typographical error. And it had nothing to do but that he was on the opposite side and wanted to delay it, and the person that made the motion to amend it, he was going to vote against anything that they came up with. And I mean, I was just appalled that you would vote against correcting the typographical error, and you would waste 5 more minutes of the committee's time calling for a roll call vote. But I do represent Senate District 6, and it's 5 counties, all of 2 counties and part of 3 other counties in the very northwest corner of the state. And I'm originally from Colbert County. In Colbert County, the way the districts are drawn now was 40% of the vote. And Roger Bedford, who had served for a long time, was from Franklin County, the county just south of us. And I'll tell you, Roger is a master politician. He didn't get reelected that many times without being very good at what he did. And he did a great job of training the people in that district to look to him for all sorts of things. He was really well known for bringing home the bacon. And if you doubt it, go look at the facilities at Russellville High School in Franklin County. They've got better athletic facilities than probably almost every small college in the state. Tennis courts, football stadium, and it's not that big a high school, but they have got unbelievable facilities there with the money that he's brought home. So he really trained the people there to look to him for everything. So the other thing that I've learned, and it's a little surprised me, is all the things that people have called me about that have nothing to do with any legislative issue. And it always starts off was, well, Senator Bedford would, and so that has been a real eye-opener for me. In 16 counties in North Alabama that are served by TVA, there's a thing called the TVA in lieu of taxes money. And that is some discretionary money that can be, that's collected through the utilities. And actually the people pay it just like any other tax. It's a 5% tax on everybody's utility bill, and 75% of the money is given directly to the counties. 25% of the money has historically been divided among the different legislators from those 16 counties to use to fund local projects. Volunteer fire departments, things that might otherwise be left out of some appropriations but are still very worthwhile things to be funded. And there's a committee that decides who gets what, a locally appointed committee anyway, and each legislator gets to appoint somebody to the committee. The point of that is the guy that I appointed from Franklin County was the same guy that Roger had appointed. He was a great guy, honest, connected in the community. It wasn't a political issue at all. He had done a great job, and I reappointed him. And the first thing he asked me was, when we hand out the grant checks, when do you want to do that? I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, Senator Bedford had one day afternoon a month that he had anybody that was getting one of those grant checks to come to the local newspaper office and get their picture made with him handing them the check. I said, I don't have any intention of doing that. I work for a living. If you grant somebody a check, put it in the mail to them. I said, you'll never see me down there getting my picture made, handing out checks. But, so anyway, that has been a little bit of an obstacle in the district of just people getting used to that way of doing things. The thing that came to mind with the way the district had been being run was a quote from our story about Yogi Berra when he was managing the Yankees, and they were in spring training, and I don't know who the player was, but somebody, they were hitting fly balls out to left field, and the guy missed several fly balls, and Yogi Berra, as the manager, started yelling at him, and he had to catch those, and let me come out there and show you how to do it. And Yogi Berra goes out to left field. They hit him some fly balls, and he misses several of them, and he comes back to the dugout and says, you messed up left field so bad that can't nobody play it. And that's kind of the way I thought about our district. I need to quit.
You know, we're going to have a couple of questions. We're going to ask the other Larry to come up.
Okay.
A couple of questions.
All right. I was going to hit some of the issues, but Will, if you got issues about anything, we'll just fill it with questions in. I guess y'all are trying to get through it.
Well, there's going to be a wedding afterwards, so we got to kind of hurry up and close up that.
Okay. All right.
Yes, sir.
Senator, I understand that because of the closeness of the vote, the recount, and you needed some legal help to make sure that election didn't get stolen by the previous incumbent. And I understand you may have some debt. Could you expand on that? Is it legal bills primarily, or?
Well, I actually don't have any legal bills. The state party did send some attorneys up to try to watch over the recount process, but they were hired by the state party and not by me. I did have campaign debt because, like I said, when I started, Bill Armstead and my wife and I were the only three people, I think, anywhere that thought I had a chance to win. And and so we didn't collect a lot of campaign contributions, and I have been able, very fortunate, very blessed, after I've won, to be able to retire the debt of the personal money that we put into the campaign. But until about 2 weeks to go before the election, we financed the campaign ourselves, because we were so committed. And I didn't get into that why I ran, but I've always felt like the Founding Fathers intended citizen legislators, and there's regular working people that have a real job needed to step up and get involved. And that Bill Armstead called and asked me if I would consider running, and first I told him no, and then I thought about it for a few days, and long story short, decided to run. And
there's three defining moments when Republicans in Alabama: Guy Hunt getting elected, 2010, the House getting taken over by Republicans, and him kicking Roger Bedford's butt.
During the campaign, I will hit on that just a second. We didn't have money to do any polling during the campaign, and we knew that Roger was polling. He had a pretty big war chest, and people were saying, you know, we got a phone call, are you polling the district, are you polling the district? And we said, no, we can't afford to. Well, with about 3 or 4 weeks to go in the race, Roger challenged me to a public debate. And when we got that phone call, we said, all right, we're getting close. 32-year incumbent doesn't challenge nobody unless the race is getting close. You know, Coke doesn't mention Pepsi in their commercials. So when we realized then we were in striking distance, and we ended up out of 35,000 votes winning by 70 votes. Wow. So it came right down to the wire. So. Other questions that I didn't really hit, I'm sorry we ran out of time, but you know, there are just a lot of issues with the budget, with education. I enjoyed what what Larry said, and all those things are so hard to measure. You know, what metrics do you use of educational success? And it's not a political issue, he's right, but it becomes one because of state funding involved. And, you know, everybody's solution that talks to us in Montgomery is we need more money for education. We need more money for education. I'll tell you, you know, the #1 funded school system in the state, most dollars per student spent in the state is Lowndes County, a failing school system. And they spend more dollars per student than any other school system in the state. So, you know, it's hard. And what are the metrics for a good teacher? You know, student performance, graduation rate. Well, you got to look at the beginning product that you're working with, the raw materials. You know, all children don't come from the same background. All children don't have the same advantages before they start to school. So there's just so many variables that are hard to measure all that. And you can use statistics to try to prove any of them. You know, Will Rogers said facts are stubborn, statistics are more pliable. You can argue a lot over the statistics. I'm sorry, any other questions? I don't mean to make anybody laugh.
We're out of time. Do you go by Dr. Senator or Senator Doctor?
Well, I've been asked that a lot, and they said, do you want to be called Senator Stutz or Dr. Stutz? I said, just call me Landslide Larry.
And we've got about 2 minutes left, and we're going to have a bird report that we haven't had in a while. Sir, yes, sir.
All right, the bird report. A company feeling it was time for a shakeup hires a new CEO. The new boss is determined to turn things around in this company. As he was on tour of the facilities, the CEO notices a guy leaning against the wall, not doing anything. The room is full of employees, and the new CEO sees this as an opportunity to show everyone he means business. The CEO walks up to the guy against the wall and says, "How much money do you make in a week?" The young man said, "About $200. Why?" The CEO pulls out 2 $100 bills out of his pocket, hands it to the young man, and screams, "Here is a week's worth of pay. Take it and get out of here and don't come back." The young man took the money, dropped his head, and left the room. Feeling pretty good about himself, the CEO turns to the employees and says, "Can anyone tell me what job that slacker did around this place?" A little lady raises her hand, and she goes, "Well, that's Billy. He's the pizza delivery guy." That's the bird report.
And meeting adjourned. Thank you everyone for coming. See you next month.